Who's your neighbor? Who's your friend?
Civil War. Civil War.
Oh, there's hate all around.
Oh, hey,
I don't care about your fucking politics. I don't want to hear about your politics. Oh, well, he said boo. Oh, and she said hooray. Now we're human beings right here. Human beings. We're here together. Come on.
All right.
All righty
right.
then.
All
Dude,
right.
that thing you sent me was so fascinating. The that Reddit thing.
Oh yeah, that was a good 8 out of 10 on the schizometer. I don't know if you read any of the
comments.
the comments, but it was like people were just so happy to finally get a real like real deal Reddit conspiracy post again. You know what I mean? They were just so happy, like yes,
someone
this
who's
is what I'm
going
here
for it
for.
all.
We're so back, we're so back, Oh my gosh, love it. I love it so much. It's so good. Oh my goodness gracious.
Like for example, like I'd like to have whoever wrote that have them on and talk to them about it.
Right. But yeah, maybe if it's even I couldn't
A
tell
person.
if it was even like real, not real, but like, was this a
joke or a half joke or
yeah, do they even really believe this stuff, or is it just
right? It's a good question. That's a good question.
because it just seemed pretty out of control,
It definitely. And there were some things that he was stating like they were just facts.
Of course.
That was like, I don't know, that was the only, I don't know, a problem I had with it, but it's like the closest thing I had to a problem with it was like talking about, like, for example, did you ever read like the whole Admiral Byrd story?
Of course.
He mentioned? Okay, right?
Of course.
Right, yeah, okay. So I read it like 20 years ago or whatever.
Yeah.
And I mean, look, I think it's super interesting, and it's one of those things where how the fuck do you confirm or deny it?
Right.
You don't.
Right.
You don't. And again, this is what this I guess this is something that I hope we get better at, and this is our lane, for lack of a better word, which is like hammering home, like, guys, what the fuck is real? What can you really fucking prove? And this is, I've said to you many times before, and I think even on this podcast, like, that's one of the things that I've always felt most connected to you about, was you're like one of the only people I know that can really get that. Whereas everyone else, I can get them to kind of acknowledge it and agree to some extent, but there's some part of them that is like, but A, B, and C is real, And my point isn't that it's not real as much as like our inability to know. And so therefore everything is like inherently speculative,
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, everything is in the realm of speculation, but I guess some things we could put degrees of confidence on, and then even those degrees, we have to put caveats, like, right? Because there are some events and things that happen that, like, okay, like Ronald Reagan was president, right? I mean, I agree that
Mm-hmm.
happened. I have no reason to really think it didn't happen. It's in the history books. I have footage of it. There's, but and that's something we can be like, Ronald Reagan was president,
Yeah.
but then you never know. There might be some shit that we don't know, some like fine print, that is like, actually, Ronald Reagan wasn't really president, even though everyone knows him as president. There's this technicality in the fine print that he actually wasn't the real president. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Or has every single election been pre-decided such that our assumption that a president as being elected is a total fraud, right? So then you could say, well, then if they were all pre-decided, if the outcomes were pre-decided or controlled, then what, then you can start questioning even what is a president then. Were any of
Yeah.
them presidents? If you're not actually elected, if you say you're elected and it's supposed to be based like a democratic election or some shit like that, and then let's say we find out later, I know all of the presidents were predetermined, pre-decided,
Right.
then it's going to call into question, were they really presidents then? Right. It's like,
Yeah,
of course they were
exactly.
presidents, but they got installed, it's like once Vannevar Bush gets, right. Because if we're saying this advanced technology stuff, it means it would be even higher level. There's an amazing post on this on Reddit. By the way, somebody found some incredible documentation that back up this idea that there was some type of secret organization and, the Majestic 12 type situation that actually happened. They found some supporting documents where people are communicating with each other in really kind of like, hey, that thing I want to say right now, but I can't. Let's make sure we meet about that next week. That kind of thing. So you've got something that's even more profoundly secret and important than even the atomic bomb, the atomic weapons. You're going to get all of the top people. You're going to get all the Einsteins and all the military guys, and you are going to create a group, and you're going to lock them in a room, until you have a plan for how you're going to manage this. And they're going to think of so many amazing things. They'll probably not think of a few things, but they're going to think of so many ways of how to manage this. And one would be that you need to either you have to make sure that every president is absolutely on your side, which it seems like that's what they started off with. There might have not been any way to, at that time, do stuff without the president knowing. But then I think at some point they decided, wait a minute, why are we telling the president anything? Let's make sure the president knows as little as possible, just enough to like kind of keep the political thing going, the political game going. But you don't want the damn president knowing anything. They're only in there for a few years. You take all the power and you put it with the deep state, with people that are in their positions for their whole life, or most of it, or something, or 30 years, 40 years. Those people is who you want making the decisions. So if you've got Vannevar Bush already in there, it sounds like Dick Cheney, according to UAP Gerb, who seems very trustworthy. It seems like Dick Cheney was running these programs as of recently. So if you've got all these people in the know, and it's and as we know, they can they'll just like destroy, rape, rob, pillage, imprison anybody for under national security concerns. And this would be easily the one of, if not the biggest, most important secret you'd ever need to keep and develop over time as well. Then maybe you do, under the guise of national security, you control all presidential elections, or you have like a mechanism where you can change it or modify it,
because right, you have something like democracy where you have these elections, and therefore that removes the need for strategically for a violent overthrow, because you don't have to do a violent overthrow.
As long as we believe that the elections are actually free and fair, legit, and whatnot. Yes, exactly. Maintain the illusion. Yes.
So it's like an insurance policy that a certain amount of stability will be maintained, in a time frame. And then when the change of power happens, it happens peacefully. And you have all this time before the person gets elected to do everything you can to either buy them or corrupt them, co-opt them, or find out every little weakness or compromising details that you can hold against them and that someone else might have and and so therefore like someone like a Trump, or like an RFK Jr., where it's like it seems pretty clear. Like it's clear to me that RFK Jr. was more Epsteined than Trump. I think Trump was Epsteined, but I feel my gut says I feel a touch less confident in that. Just like there's just something about like because RFK Jr. is he's been so knowledgeable about so much, whereas Trump you just don't know. You and that's part of why I sent you that video yesterday. I don't know if you got to watch it or speed through it. The one with Alex Trainer, Tom
Looking.
Longo. I in part I'm sending that to you because you know and Tom Longo is that guy we've talked about multiple times,
Yeah.
right? I'm talking about
Yeah.
and he's I don't know, like a lot of things rub me wrong about him, but other things I'm like, you know what? I couldn't defeat him in a debate regarding what his way of seeing things are.
Mhm.
He knows more about the market than I do. He knows there's a lot of things he knows more about than I do that I feel I give him the benefit of the doubt. And I'm open to that, like he's totally corrupted or co-opted or Epsteined or or Israel's giving him 7,000 a post or whatever, so he'll go out there and ridicule the people that I normally more side with and agree with.
Mhm.
Um, and there's something and ultimately so the thing that I sent you is these four people. This guy Crypto Rich, I think is the podcast name.
Okay.
And then Tom Longo, who we've talked about, who I've just been talking about. Alex Craner, who I'm a big fan of, and I love him. Like I'm not saying me and him agree on everything, but who cares? I don't need that. I just to me, Alex Craner is someone I don't have my gut is not saying he's a liar. He just seems like he is who he is, and he's very smart, and he really knows his history,
Mhm.
and he really knows the market. Um, the other guest is this woman.
Hokinda?
Yeah, yeah. So
I've got it going on the
she's
screen, by the way. You're probably not seeing, but
okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah. And so she's from the Lyndon LaRouche um, tree. I don't know if you know much about Lyndon LaRouche, who
I
he
don't think
was.
so. I don't think so.
He was a guy, he died, I don't know, in the past like 10 years or something like that. And he died, he was like close to 100. He was he was a guy that was like an economist, a philosopher, and and I guess whatever, for lack of a better word, you could call it conspiracy theorist. Um, and okay, one person I think you do know that comes from his tree is that guy Webster Tarpley.
Yeah.
He had that. I remember you had that book back in the day when we first met, Synthetic Terror. It was all about like 9/11.
Yeah.
And Webster Tarpley, was someone I used to listen to a decent amount. Um, you can still go and find Lyndon LaRouche and Webster Tarpley talk about their version of history and their take of what's really going on in the world. And like whereas someone like an Alex Jones is kind of like all bombast and almost like performance art, whether intentional or not. um, Lyndon LaRouche, or this woman, however you pronounce her name, Susan Kinda or whatever, or Webster Tarpley, like that they basically are. They're not that bombast. They have the right, like, you know, that kind of even keel voice, you know, like the Chomsky kind of approach, where
Mhm.
you're not, you know, that exudes credibility
Yeah.
to most people looking for information. Even though, like, to me, I do think it's, I don't know, I feel to some extent there's a stylistic approach to it. You know, like it's known that if I speak in this calm monotone, you know, people will think I'm rational. Whereas
Mhm.
me, I'm kind of like, whatever, I'll just fucking speak off my mind and go. And some people be like, well, I'm turned off by that.
Yeah.
And that's fine. You know, okay. You know, that's cool. But anyway, these guys go deep into like the whole Venice thing. Do you know like the whole Venetian thing? Like basically tracing back, trying to follow the money,
Sure.
right? And like the Doge coin, you know, the whole thing with the Doge was like the guy from Venice,
Yeah.
you know, and which was interesting that when Elon brought that back, and I was like, whoa, that's weird. You know, that harkens back to that whole, you know, whatever, the master of commerce of Venice or some shit like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Um, anyway, like you know, LaRouche is kind of like this guy that in mainstream media, he would on occasion get on to mainstream media and they would try to tear him apart and say all these things about him and, you know, say he eats babies or whatever, you know, like
Yeah.
he's evil and bad. But he was a guy that was like, whereas Chomsky was just going to talk about more surface level stuff, you know, but stay away from the really deeper stuff.
Yeah.
Um, like someone like Lyndon LaRouche and his tree, they would try to go deep. And a lot of their thesis was that all of this really goes back in modern times to really the city of London, um, which is like the original Wall Street. Um, you know, like the Glorious Revolution, the Bank of England, you know, Glorious Revolution, whatever, like 1688 or something, and Bank of England 1694 or some shit like that. And and the Bank of England they create because they want to like try to destroy France, and no one else will lend them money at what they think is a reasonable rate.
Hmm.
So because they kept on like losing, I believe, to France. And so they weren't getting offered good rates. So they said, let's just create our own bank and make our own money. And then we can fund our own war efforts and, you know, take this empire to the next level. And that's kind of the model that we, you know, has been existing since then. And there's been like, they go into shit like Venice and the British East India Company, and which all this stuff I think is clearly relevant
Hmm.
and part of the story. Um, and they go about it in a, I'd say, in a pretty scholarly way. You know, even though they get character assassinated, if they're ever talked about in academic circles or whatever. But so Tom Longo and Alex Trainer are both, you know, and myself, I think there's clearly something to the City of London thing. Like now, Tom Longo takes it to a, you know, he's basically like, to all these people that think this is about Israel or the Jews or, you know, and I'm against the whole the Jews thing. You know, I think that's the wrong way to think about it. I mean, I'm Jewish, you know,
Hmm.
and so not only like, and honestly, even though just the racism thing aside, which I mean, obviously everyone knows racism is bad, but there's some like say the way that whether it was like BLM or LGBTQ or Israel, they try to use the accusation of racism and they try to weaponize it to silence critics,
Sure.
you know?
Of course.
And yeah, it's a damn good approach. It's a great smart thing because, and especially for people that identify as more liberal or left, like it's like to molest babies is is not as bad as saying the N-word.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
Like if you had to say the N-word out loud
Mm-hmm.
or molest a child, which one would you do? And a liberal would be like, "Ugh," you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Where I'd be like, Edward, you know, like I don't want to say it at all,
Right,
but
sure.
like, you know, sure, like one clearly is much less harm, the other one you're like raping a child. Like,
Right.
but to them, they'd have to think about it because
Mm-hmm.
whatever, that's how they've been brainwashed.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I once did too, because I once fell for it also. And obviously, again, racism is terrible, or blah blah blah, you know, and all
Yeah.
the caveats, like the Holocaust and the pogroms, you know, all the
Mm-hmm.
caveats.
Right.
But that being said, that we shouldn't use the Holocaust and the pogroms and slavery to justify, you know, terrible things. You know,
Yeah, we shouldn't use those things to justify a Holocaust and pogroms and
yeah, exactly, no, exactly.
no, and it's like I mean, I've said it before and I'll say it again. It's crazy because you would think you would think thou shalt not kill was clear enough, but it wasn't.
Right, right.
Oh my god.
And that's why, like, I feel like Professor Zhang, I feel like my gut says he hit something on the head where he said, like, basically, like, that whatever, he says, like, the Frankists, these, you know,
Mm-hmm,
who a
mm-hmm,
lot of them were Jews, you know,
mm-hmm.
they made this deal
Yes.
with, like, the black nobility where, you know, these older families from, like, Venice and before that, and probably look, and honestly, like we probably have to start looking more deeply into things like the Knights Templar and shit. Because I do think there's something like that thing that you sent from Reddit.
Yeah, right. Where
Like,
it tries to put everything on a timeline. And I feel like
yeah,
that we don't as per our earlier conversations, we want a simple mythology
mm-hmm,
that just explains what I'm experiencing right this second.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And the idea of taking all of human history, or let's go even further, the history
mm-hmm,
of this form of the universe,
mm-hmm,
and being able to see the whole thing
mm-hmm.
as like a it's much harder to control the narrative,
Mm-hmm.
because the narrative is about what's happening right now, and it's a really
Or at least
short-sighted
that's where a
short
person's
explanation of why things are
emotionalism is.
happening. I'm sorry, what?
Like that's where a person's, because to what you were saying, which I totally agree with, is because people want it explained of like where they're at right now.
Yes.
Because where they're at right now is where they are emotionally.
Yes.
Like, all right.
And a simple explanation too, by the way.
Oh, well, of course. And, you know,
Right.
I don't know if you heard that, like Eleanor Roosevelt quote or something she said, like, I think it was like Gore Vidal said it, like that. She said to FDR or someone, she was like, you must keep it simple. You know, you shouldn't make it too complicated. Make it simple and short. And that's how you deliver your message, you know. But this stuff is, I guess if you want to keep it simple and short, you can be like, well, there are really powerful, smart chess players who have made it so that no one else can really even enter their game, you know? And that's what really runs the world, you know? And there's all these mechanisms and systems that they've set up in institutions, you know? And then if you're going to go against it, it's going to be David against, not Goliath, but David against like a zillion Goliaths, you know? So it's like, good luck with that, you know? And that's why, like, say someone like a Jack Cruz, I think what he's doing is, I see the strategy in it. He's like not getting too big. It's like he's intentionally not getting too big. He's like going to do a grassroots approach
Mm-hmm.
where he's just going to reach people on smaller podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
So by the time Fox News or, you know, MSNBC or whoever like are going to, you know, are told like, all right, it's time to take down Jack Cruz. By the time that happens, like he will have been doing his thing for so long, he's not going to let happen to him what happened to like Alex Jones, even though you know he's worlds above Alex Jones in my opinion. You know, and to bring back to like the Tom Longo and Susan Lucinda and the Lyndon LaRouche thing, I think that there's clearly something there, you know, to the City of London thing, and that being, if not the head of the snake, one of the heads of the snake. And now Tom Longo kind of bothers me when at times when and like this is where I like Alex Trainer more, because Alex Trainer will be posting like shit that Israel does, and it's heartbreaking. Whereas like Tom Longo is kind of like, why am I going to post shit? You know, that's just going to get people angry at Israel and the Jews. You know, whereas like, how do you not realize that this is relevant? Like, or why do you not care? You know, and he's just like, whatever, it's all about City of London. And I do, you know,
that's too simple. But
like
now, we know from talking, we know that's too simple. What about before there was London? It's like, oh, all of a sudden, once there's London, now there's like an issue. No, it started before that.
Totally. No, amen. Exactly. And I guess
ever heard of ancient Egypt? You know what I mean? Yeah.
Right. And I guess I still choose to put myself through listening to Tom Longo, because sometimes he says things that I think are really fucking spot on. Now he's, in my opinion, he's like very bullish on Trump, like very bullish, like really thinks Trump is fighting the good fight, and he openly says he's like, look, a lot of people, they give me shit for this, and they think, oh, you're one of these Trump is playing 5D chess people, you know. And honestly, I would, you know, that's part of my problem with him too, but I don't listen to too many people that are like so bullish on Trump. You know, I listen to most of the people I listen to aren't fans of Trump. I don't really listen to anyone that has Trump derangement syndrome. Like, because when someone has Trump derangement syndrome, I'm like, goodbye. Like, you can keep doing your thing, but I don't need to really hear it, because I'm not going to learn much from it, because you're just ultimately been a reactionary, you know, where your emotional state right now, like, and that's what I think part of the theater of the kidnappings are right now with ICE. Like this feels like we're getting trolled, and you know, and on top of it, there are these people that are having their lives destroyed, and that's legit, you know, and terrible. You know, like if they came and tried to take Emory, like you said, you'd be like, you would do fucking everything in your power.
Yeah.
You know, but part of what we're witnessing,
I guess I'm going to jail.
Yeah, they're like, fine, go to jail. It won't matter. It won't stop us from taking him.
Right.
You know, and you can, and that's part of, and again, I'm just speaking out loud off the top of my head, because I do feel like so much of the world as we know it, we can't verify it. And there's just a certain theater to it, whether we like it or not. And whether it's real or not. And like, you know, like the woman who got shot, right?
Oh yeah, 3 times in the face.
3 times in the face, you know, because 2 wasn't enough. You know, and I think about how the right wingers were, you know, when the George Floyd nonsense was going on, and then it was just open season to go and do that type of shit in the reverse, you know, but instead of it being ICE agents, it was just like whatever you want to call, just people on the streets. Like there was footage, there'd be footage of, you know, some people on the highway, and then like a group of people just surround their car, you know, and the people are trying to get away, but they won't let them get away, and then the car eventually like reluctantly like drives through the people. And then the mainstream media is like, can you believe these monsters? They're trying to run people over. And it's like, wait, like that big group of fucking thugs started to try to attack some random person in the car who clearly was trying, it seemed like, you know, or like the Kyle Rittenhouse shit. Like I see like people on Facebook, friends of mine, like posting this Kyle Rittenhouse stuff now. I might have even taken a picture of it because, and like the Kyle Rittenhouse, again, like the whole thing is about, in my mind, bigger picture. You know, small. Another Eleanor Roosevelt quote is, you know, small minds think of people, middle minds think of events, and the great minds think of ideas. You know, so everyone's getting caught up on, most everyone I know is getting caught up on the people. You know, they're like, someone on our side got hurt.
Of course,
not okay.
Yeah. Right.
You know?
Right.
And then some a little bit smarter than that are like trying to talk about the event. But to me, I'm like, what's the idea? The greater idea is, you know, is that as long as they do narrative control, they're going to brutalize you from this side and that side. And they're going to easily manufacture consent from one side in that case, and then the other side in another case. And to me, you know, and whether it's like this girl who got shot 3 times in the face, or the people who got, you know, attacked in a car, you know, or, you know, not letting a woman, you know, choose to have an abortion, or not letting someone choose whether they want to inject themselves with a fucking experimental dangerous shot. You know, my body, my choice. And that's why it bothers me. And I'm like, I'm waiting to find a real liberal, you know, like a real genuine liberal, not a phony liberal that's like, I'm a liberal because I do A, B, and C. It's like, no, liberalism isn't about you're on team red or team blue. You know, being a liberal, like a real liberal, liberalism is about like, is supposed to be about not being a bigot. You know, not closing your heart off. You know, like Huxley said, the point of propaganda is to make one group of people think another group of people are not human. And I see that just happening left and right. That to me is the idea here. The people is this woman who got shot, or the ICE agent, or whatever, you know, and the event is, you know, that they're going to do their ICE raids, and then someone is trying to get in their way and say, no, I'm not cool with this, and I'm going to obstruct you, you know?
Yeah.
And the idea is like, dude, we're going to do what we want, and there's nothing you can do to stop us. And, you know, we can just keep on switching, you know, the good cop, bad cop uniform from red to blue, red to blue, red to blue, and we can get you to be like, that's right. You know, like Don Lemon on CNN being like, you know, that's right. If you see some of these people who don't want to take the vaccine, we got to stop being nice to them.
You're right.
We got to start excluding them from life, you know, and it's like, whoa, you're saying this shit on CNN? Like, what the fuck? You know? And it's like, how do you know, and so how do you get people to not fall for the trick of propaganda to make one group of people think the other group of people are less than humans?
Yeah.
You know? And like I can't bridge that gap with my family and most of my friends about Israel Palestine. Like they just can't. They're like, no, these people are animals.
Right.
Like, I can't tell you how many of these people I know have said that to me.
It's like, well, what else? Like, what else is there? You know?
Yeah. right?
Like, if they kill us, we got to kill them. Like, what else would
Yeah,
you? What? There's like, sure. I'm all
yeah,
for peace,
yeah.
but what other option is there?
Yeah.
Just like me,
And
like I'm guilty of
and
it too. I just said
mhm,
it with Emery.
yep.
If somebody was trying to harm my son, yeah, I'm probably gonna kill him.
Yeah. Right. And but that's okay. So let's go with that. Because to me, that's where I think it starts to get into a little more nuance, which is that I don't have a problem. Like, I won't judge a person badly for caring more about your family member or one of your good friends versus some random stranger.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's totally normal and understandable. Maybe we shouldn't necessarily devalue a stranger's life compared to a family or a friend, but you know what I'm saying? Like, let's just be real. If we asked every person in the world, or let's just say with America, like in America, you ask every person, like, who would you rather die tomorrow? Your child or some random stranger? And it's like 9 out of 10, if not 10 out of 10, are gonna, say, yeah, I'd rather some stranger die than my child. And I think we can all get that, right? We can all
Yeah.
understand that. But when does that stop? And that's why I think, all right, you gotta have a little zone like that. But then when a person's like, well, I'm Jewish, so like I'm Jewish, but I'm like, no, I'm not okay with. I don't identify, like, I don't look at Israelis as more family or friend to me than a Palestinian.
Mhm.
You know, nor do I feel that way about. Well, here's a stranger who's going to get killed. They're white or they're black. Which one do you prefer? I'm like, I don't have a preference. It's not like asking me a stranger or my child. You know what I'm saying? I'm
Mhm.
saying, so your family and friend, I think it's like it makes sense that, like, and I feel like this is part of the idea that we need to gain a better understanding of, because I think the lack of understanding of this nuance is what leads people to be like, no, well, fuck these Democrats, kill them. You're like,
Mhm.
yes, that's right. Let ICE go in there and just kill them and kidnap them. Like, that was a 10-year-old boy who was a citizen. I don't care. You know,
Or the
and it's
Target
like,
kid, man, that broke my heart. Jeez,
yeah,
that video is
it's terrible.
messed up, man.
It's terrible. And I'm seeing, like, the comment sections of Zero Hedge, like, having some interesting back and forth about it. Where I'm seeing some people being like, yo, all right, maybe this chick who got shot in the face, maybe she shouldn't have got, like, maybe she, was in the wrong in some ways and brought this on herself in a lot of ways. But that being said, I'm not some bootlicker who thinks it's okay to just kill someone because, they obstructed justice or whatever, obstructed law enforcement or whatever, you know. Whereas other people were like, no, these people are paid protesters,
Yeah.
and I, it's just weird and complicated, and I do think that these issues are at the heart of the problem facing humanity right now, because I do think that we all fall guilty for, I care a little bit more sometimes about someone I'm a little more ideologically aligned with or politically aligned with. And now I'm putting those people closer to my friend and family category,
Mhm.
and now I will justify terrible things happening because to defend my group,
Right. Right.
which is ultimately what,
Yeah.
right? Which is ultimately what, like, say, like my dad feels about Israel. He's like, fuck these people.
Yeah.
Like, I'm done playing nice with them.
Mhm.
Fuck
Right.
them.
Right.
They hurt us. They attacked us. Fuck them. Which, in his own way, he's saying, in his own way, I think it's very different, but he doesn't. He thinks he's saying a very similar thing as you are about if they came and tried to take Emory.
Mhm.
you know, and in his own way, like he's fallen for that propaganda.
Right.
So in some way, he's not lying. That's real to him, and I need to recognize that,
Right.
and work with that, and try to meet
Yeah.
him there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And someone like, and then, you know, because really on some level, you know, when it's funny because it's like Chomsky would say when he's like, I'd go to Israel, and when I speak in Israeli university, I'd be critical of Israel. Then when I go to some Palestinian place, I'd be critical of the Palestinians.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of have that too. And so when I'm talking to someone who's like a Republican, you know, they're like, oh my God, you're this far left crazy guy.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm talking to some Democrats, they're like, oh my God, you're like a Trumper. You know? And, you know, so I'm like one of many people who now finds themselves pretty politically homeless
Mm-hmm.
for the sin of, you know, having heterodox views or being open-minded enough to question my own, you know, identity groups, groupthink,
Yeah.
more than most are willing to do.
Yeah.
You know, and so I'm getting considered an other, you know, one group of people that thinks the other group of people is less than human, you know, even though, you know, like, I mean, you know, I live in New York City and I know all these people here, and especially, you know, from Odin School, where the parents, like, some of them like really like me, but then all of a sudden they're like, when they heard I didn't take the vaccine, they were like, oh my God, he's a Trumper. And they like, I don't know, they were like, so Josh is like a right winger, huh?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and Steph would be like, no, not at all.
Mm-hmm.
But they couldn't get past it. They were, you know, or they'd be like, oh, is Josh pro-Israel? And she's like, no, you know, and they're like, what?
Yeah.
How could he not be?
Yeah.
You know, and that's the thing. I think like that's the type of thing, the leadership, you know, that brings about the healing and that brings people together and gets people to not get caught up on the things they shouldn't be getting caught up on, that allow them to dehumanize others.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and when I talk to like a real right winger, like when I go to like Maria's family thing, and they're more like real old school conservatives, where they're like, most of them were in the military and whatever. They're really nice people. They're good people. I like them, but you know, there have been a few times when I'm like, when I'm talking to them or almost like debating them, and then when I say something like, well, you know, the hypocrisy thing, or okay, so if you're okay with us doing that to them, would you be okay with them doing that to you? And they like look at me like, what? Like, what are you even talking about? How is that even relevant?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, you don't get it. Like, you see, it's like, so you're fine with doing whatever you want to anyone, as long, you know, but you'll have a problem if they do it to you. And they're like, no, I wouldn't do X, Y, and Z. Okay, so you wouldn't go kill someone, you wouldn't go rape someone or steal from them, but you're okay with your team doing it, you know, your government and your military doing it, you know. And so the bringing in morality, you know, to the conversation, like a lot of the right wing, it's interesting that, and I do feel, and I've always, I don't know, the hypocrisy is off the chart. And it's not just the right wing, because I found it, you know, in the liberal class too, you know, where they just so easily dehumanize these people that see things differently than them. And it's just wild to me, you know, and I do think it is the cancer. You know, I do think that is at the root of the cancer. Like, without that, empire doesn't stand a chance, because it's like that, you know, was it Christmas Day on World War I, right? That story where the soldiers just, they took it off, they took the day off, and then they all got together and celebrated and sang and loved each other. And then for like a short period after that, they had a trouble fighting each other after that.
Right, of course.
Right. But then it was like, hey, I'm sure they must have gotten threatened and like, dude, if you don't go and kill, like, we're going to shoot you or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
Like that Kubrick film, Paths of Glory. You know, if they're not going to go out and fight, then we're going to shoot at our own soldiers, you know?
Mm-hmm.
You know, because once people start to humanize each other, it gets a lot harder to kill each other.
Yeah, right. I mean, well, that is the value of the false flag, right? The false flag attack.
Right.
Is oh, our guys don't hate the other side enough, so we need to fake an attack from the other side and blame it on them to get our morale up. You know, we ain't got enough killing juice.
Yeah,
We ain't got enough tackling fuel, and more tackling fuel. You know, absolutely right.
Yeah.
Absolutely right. Yes. Yeah. No. And as Yuji would say, until the actual experience of destroying someone else, we experience it as destroying ourselves, then we're not going to stop, because we believe in separation. We believe that there are other people, and that if you kill someone else, it has no impact on you. What's the problem besides like your conscience or something like boo?
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, you really want that separation thing going, you know?
Right. Yeah, it's just, yeah, it's and to bring it back to something I was talking about earlier with the Tom Longo stuff, like part of me, it's difficult for me to listen to him sometimes.
Who?
Tom Longo.
Yeah, gotcha.
There's just times when I'm like, really? Like, you really think that? Like, you're really gonna be that like smug and arrogant about it too, on top of it? But that being said, he'll also explain things and talk about things that, you know, I don't, in a way that it's hard to find others being that articulate about it. And it's like challenging for me. You know, it's difficult for me to consider some of what he's saying. So I like force myself to do it. And it's not fun, you know, but and it's also weird because it keeps me in this place of uncertainty, because almost everyone else I listen to is feeling this very other way about it, you know? And again, I told you, like, I'm not listening to the Trump derangement syndrome people, you know? But because I mean, the Trump derangement side is whatever, that's like ridiculous to me too, you know? Like, everything that he does is clearly the work of Hitler or Satan, you know? And I feel like because they go so hard in that way, it leaves this big open lane for someone like Tom Longo, and even someone like who I like more, like Alex Craner. He's like, look, like the corporate media has such Trump derangement syndrome that, you know, it influences a smarter mind to, you know, to become open to things. You know, like Alex Craner's like, look, like, don't even listen to Trump's words. That's what he says. He's like, I don't even really listen to Trump's words most of the time. Because if you just listen to his words, you'll get confused and lost and angry. You know, like, he's just going up there and saying almost anything and seeing what works, you know, and he's like, look at the policy, look at the National Security Directive, you know, report, you know, and what they're laying out. And he's, you know, and Alex Craner's of the thought that, you know, that most of this does come back to the City of London, which I do think is the case also. and I do think there are things that go back before the City of London, but that is clearly with this concentration of power, like the original Wall Street, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm of the opinion that, for example, like Wall Street has more power than DC.
Mm-hmm.
Like DC is following the headlines. Wall Street's more following the money. And someone like Trump is middle management. He's not the king. But and to bring it back to Professor Zhang, when he's saying like this deal struck between the black nobility and the Frankist Jews, that basically, all right, here's the deal. We're going to do this together. We're going to do this like world domination thing together. And part of the role that the Jews are going to play is that they're going to be the scapegoats.
Mm.
And if I said something like that to my dad, he'd be like, "What are you talking about?" And then you have like Nat Rothschild tweeting, congratulations to Trump right after Venezuela, right after they get Maduro, and then another tweet congratulating him for what he's trying to do in Iran. And I'm like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that?
Yeah.
Right? Like, why are you of all people going and doing that? Like, you should be far away from that thing, because you have so many people who are like, think it's all about your family. And you're going to go out there and put your name on like endorsing this shit, when so many people, I mean, unless you want to do that and then embolden those people and anger those people so that they'll go and post more shit so that you can now surveil them better, which is what I would assume,
Yeah.
Oh man, because it just doesn't. That's why like that thing you sent was like, I don't know, it was just like, if nothing else, it was like thought-provoking and entertaining. To consider that there's much deeper shit going on that's otherworldly,
Right. Exactly.
That isn't just like, whereas Tom Longo is kind of like, fuck David Icke. He's like, fuck David Icke. And I don't really care about David Icke
Me
myself,
either.
but like, yeah, I'm like, whatever.
Hey, thanks for the reptilian sub drama subplot. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly. Even though it's weird, because as time has gone on, in some ways seen through a particular lens, I say he's aged better, almost like Alex Jones. They both aged better in certain ways than one might have expected.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you got to take them with a grain of salt, but like, I'm sure you've seen those memes about things Alex Jones has said that have turned out to be true.
Yeah.
It's like, holy shit,
like it did turn the frogs gay. Holy shit. Yeah. Good Lord.
Yeah, like
some of the most outrageous shit. It's like, oh wow, that's insanity.
Like that was the one, the frog's gay. I was like, come on, that's clearly retarded.
Yeah, no, of course.
Nonsense. And then it's like, whoa, there's something to it.
Well, which then leads, interestingly, if you take it further, it's like, oh wait, so animals being gay does happen?
yeah, right.
Wait, it is natural? Like it does happen sometimes? It's like, oh yes, actually in hundreds of species we've seen gay homosexual relationships and behavior and stuff like that. It's totally normal and natural. It's like, oh crap, I didn't want it to go in that direction.
Yeah, right. Like Mr. Panda, even you're gay. Mr. Panda's like, yo, a hole's a hole, bitch.
Yeah, well, no, and like there are animals that are both male and female. It would really it really complexify, like snails or hermaphrodites and stuff like that. You know what I mean? It's like, oh wait, this whole people being trans and changing gender and stuff is actually baked into like nature and it's totally natural and fine. Like, oh yeah, okay, darn it.
Well, I mean, I'd have to think that, like, let's say, like in prison, for example, there's a lot of gay sex that happens where the people weren't necessarily gay, but they're just in jail, and all they have access to is other men. And then so, right?
Well,
It's
or
like
they, you know, it was so, you know, there's probably like 5, 6, 7, 10 different reasons
yeah,
that
yeah,
stuff can happen.
yeah.
Sexuality, boredom, power, where you're
Mhm.
doing it to like just dominate the other person,
Hmm.
sex, drugs, and oh my gosh, all sorts of yeah.
And you know, some people get turned on by getting patted on the head and being told, "Good little boy, good little girl."
Right, sure.
And some of us are more like, we get a kick and turned on by someone being like, "What did you just say? Like, did that person just really say that out loud?"
Mm.
You know? And so I do think like there's a lot of factors that go in, you know, and at some point, you know, maybe we throw off the shackles of peer and parental approval, you know, and say, "Fuck you. I'm going punk rock." You know, I'm not going to try to look pretty and make nice sounding songs. I'm going to fucking ugly this shit up. You know, I'm going to go the other way. I'm going to go and shock you, you know, instead of like, "No, I want to gain your approval." And
Monkey.
um, you know, but something that like Kurt Metzger always talks about that I totally agree with is that, look, the real truth is, and someone like my dad would say, "Look, there's human nature. We're animals. We're just not good, you know. We just do terrible things. Human nature is, you know, is a beastly nature." And I'm like, it can be, you know, but like Kurt Metzger says, and I agree with him, like, no, I think the real nature is that we're programmable, you know,
Mm-hmm.
is that we can be programmed one way or the other in whatever matter. And then there's certain issues where it becomes like politically incorrect to talk about things or attempt to talk about things. So that makes it so that everyone's got to shut the fuck up unless you have a degree in this. You know, let the experts talk, which is like the whole exclusionary thing, but inverted, you know? And that's why it's, you know, I don't know, I guess just to me, it's like, what's the problem with questioning things? What's the problem with finding inappropriate things funny? You know? What's the problem with like liking Bill Hicks as opposed to liking Jerry Seinfeld?
Mm-hmm.
You know? Yeah, I dig Bill Hicks a lot more than Jerry Seinfeld.
Right, me too.
You know, yeah, you know, Jerry Seinfeld bores the fuck out of me, you know, and I just want nothing to do with, like, if he's on, I'm like, I'll flip the channel or watch something else. Like Bill Hicks is on, like, I will watch that shit,
Yeah,
you know, because someone who shakes it up and pushes the envelope, and pushes the boundaries, like, I think that's, you know, like I was trying to talk to, like, you know, even though Odin was asking like the other day about like he was asking about something that was, and it's basically like about a double standard that works against men
Mm-hmm.
or boys that doesn't work against girls.
Yeah.
And I was trying to explain it to him. And I was like, look, you know, the real thing, the real place we want to get to, we want to be past bigotry. You know, move past bigotry. And some people don't want to do that, you know, and there are people on different sides of this debate that don't want to move past bigotry. You know, now you have some people that want things to be like it once was at one point, you know, when whatever certain groups had power and dominion over others. Yeah, but I don't really know any of those people. I'm sure they exist, but I don't really know them. Like, because even the ones that might prefer that, they don't feel it that strongly that they're going to get like worked up about it, you know? Like, I don't know anyone. I'm sure we know some, but I don't really hang out with them. I don't know someone that's like, I want women in the kitchen or whatever, like blacks can't come in through the front door, or Chinese can't come in through the front door or whatever. But I'm sure they exist, I'm sure they do. They
Yeah.
have to.
Yeah.
But I know plenty of people, that proudly, say shit like,
Well, they might say that about the Palestinians or something.
yeah, oh, exactly. Well, that's the thing, right? You'll get people like Bill Maher, who will like proudly say that shit about Palestinians, you know? Like the clip you sent me with that from '96 with that alien or that alien looking thing,
Yeah.
or whatever it was, which was wild. That was wild. There was another clip followed it because like, when
Like
that
automatic
ended,
or something.
yeah,
Yeah.
automatic. And so like a clip that followed automatic was Tim Allen, I guess, being hanging out with Bill Maher. I guess this happened recently. Like,
Okay.
not on Bill Maher's like HBO show, but he has like some podcast like Club Random or whatever, Club Random Douchebag,
Yeah.
and in it, he was basically, they were talking about aliens. Actually, I was going to send it to you because it was like interesting. It was like, because Bill Maher is like, if you've been like question 9/11, he'll be like, you're ridiculous, you're anti-science and anti-rational and whatever,
Oh Lord.
But they were talking about aliens, and Bill Maher is like, oh, this is totally rational. This is totally scientific, which I think is an interesting, whatever, hypocrisy or double standard. But anyway, I was like, whatever, at least, he's not ridiculing Tim Allen, because Tim Allen was talking about some sort of alien experience.
Mm-hmm.
And then Bill Maher was like, I know a lot of people like you who aren't crazy, and they're very calm about it, and they have these experiences where they've had these experiences, and he's like, I don't think it's irrational. I don't think it's crazy. And I was like, huh, interesting, because I've never heard him say that on the show. Probably because if he said that on the show, they'd be like, what? No, like we don't, even though that's becoming more normalized. But dude, 20 years ago when you and I first met, like aliens was like, if you brought up aliens, like people are going to look at you like you're speaking Chinese or something.
Oh yeah.
Well,
I still hide those books in my library. I was like, wait, it's way over there on the bottom shelf. And I've got a lot of them too. You know what I'm saying? I don't even know if we've ever talked about this, but like, and I don't know if you felt the same way, but back when I was a kid,
mm-hmm.
and like people read books,
mm-hmm.
and like I would go to Barnes and Noble and Half Price Books,
mm-hmm.
and there was another one, another big one that's gone now. Anyway, there were a lot of alien books when I was a kid. There were a lot. And still to this day, people talk about Communion, the book by Whitley Strieber, that has the gray alien on the front,
totally.
as being like a really big deal to people. So many people saying when they saw that cover, it made them remember things that had happened, and like, so to me, it seems like, again, under national security, you would not have any of that information. You would not want that information released. However, they did.
Yeah.
So there's some, and this is obviously not, I didn't think of this or something. There's some benefit or plan of releasing information slowly.
Yep.
And it seems like books and movies were some of the first ways that they did that. And we're
Totally.
past the book
Mhm.
era, you know, but
Mhm.
looking back, I'm like, wow, it's because it was the perfect. Because did my parents read those books? No,
No.
I
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
My generation,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
or right, the generation below me, mine, and above me, right, or something,
Yeah.
right, like,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
you know,
Uh-huh.
that it was. You've got Close Encounters of the Third Kind. You've got E.T. I mean, how many
Mhm.
alien movies were there? You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like, oh my God,
totally.
you could keep going on
Yep.
and on and on, and it'd all be 80s and 90s, and maybe a little bit early 2000s.
Yes.
Independence Day and
Uh-huh.
blah blah
Uh-huh.
blah 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 blah. You know, it was
Mhm.
a huge deal. It was a huge thing, and are adults going to take that seriously? No, but kids will. Kids will see ET and go, "Wow,
Yep.
what if that is real? What
Yep.
if there are aliens? What if some of them are like?" Because that was one of the first ones that I can think of. I know there's a Disney one, Flight of the Navigator, and
Yep.
then
I remember that
ET,
one.
where the aliens are good. They're chill.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
ET's like here
Yeah.
to collect plants. Like this
Yeah.
motherfucker's
Yeah.
chill. Like he eats
Yeah.
Reese's
Yeah.
Pieces
Uh-huh.
and fucking collects plants. Like I like this guy,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So introducing the idea of multiple types that
Yep.
that either they're totally benign Reese's Pieces eaten or they're here to blow us the fuck up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was
Uh-huh.
always one of those two. And yeah, so I feel like there was a there had to have been a benefit to that. And
Yeah.
look, I'll go either way. Either because there are like lots of alien species and you need to slowly drip out the information because you don't want it to all of a sudden come out that there's all this stuff and people lose their fucking minds because people are
Yeah.
losing their fucking minds over like Taco Bell getting rid of the, you know, cheesy gordita crunch or some shit. You know what I mean? So yeah, definitely there's going to be a subset of the population that is not going to handle it well. Okay. It doesn't matter
Mhm.
what the news is.
Yeah.
Or
Yes.
there's not, and you need to run that cover story for a variety of reasons. There
Yeah.
aren't aliens. We're the only ones. We're the only place with life. But you need that to create a cover story for advanced technology, for faking an invasion later, for I don't know, probably other shit that I'm not thinking of.
Mhm.
But the technology angle and faking the invasion would be two huge trump cards. You know, I
Mhm.
don't even want to say
Yeah.
Trump anymore, but
Yeah. No pun intended.
you know, right? No, I mean it's like those would be very valuable. You
Mhm.
know, so I could see the value of either way, and maybe it's a combination of both, right? There's probably, depending on what level of government we're going into, there's probably levels of people that are very high up, but they have no knowledge of any of this stuff, and so they're going at
Right.
it with just purely a psychological lens. And then there's probably a higher up level where they do know way more about what's actually going on in terms of life in the rest of the universe, or even the other types of life that are on Earth now.
Mhm.
And right, so which would make so much more sense, right? That because you want it compartmentalized.
Yes.
That you want it
Yep.
compartmentalized. So you want this
100%.
office over here
Uh-huh.
producing tacos because
Yep.
they just love making tacos. And
Yeah,
then you
yeah,
want this
yeah.
other group over here making tacos because they're targeting a certain group of people that love tacos. And you
Mhm.
want all the different ones. You want it
Yeah.
as obscured and multi-layered and multifaceted as possible. Just as a defense mechanism, just as a way so that you just don't have, you know, you don't have all the people who know the Coca-Cola recipe in the same room at one time. You don't have
Yeah.
all the people who know
Yeah.
how to refine uranium or plutonium or
Yeah.
whatever in the
Yeah.
same room at the same time. You just want it spread out. You just want to make it difficult. You want to spread out the knowledge, and then, you know, over time things are going to get released. But even if a person is like a whistleblower, then worst case scenario, they know 1% of everything that's going on, and they reveal the 1%, and you can kind of still go to bed at night. Goes, well, we need this information to come out slowly over time anyway. It's a, you know, okay, it's not. So you can plan for the whistleblowers. What I'm saying, you can't
Yeah.
go, oh, we're going to keep the secret no matter what. You
Yeah.
say, okay, we're going to keep this secret no matter what, but we have to admit that some of this is going to get out, And so therefore we make sure that only
Uh,
each person that's in there knows 0.1% of the full story. So that even
yeah.
if they do whistleblow and say and come out with everything on their deathbed, then 0.1% comes out, and that's well within our planned revealing of the information. You would,
Yeah.
that's how I always felt about Bob Lazar, is that there was
I was
something
just gonna
about
bring
the
him
way
up.
that
Yep.
he spoke that I kind of believe that
Uh-huh.
he experienced some stuff.
Yeah.
Was he programmed with that? Did they create that? Like, here's this guy. There's no reason to trust that guy. So
Mhm.
there's no reason to trust that guy. We're going to bring him in as like a contractor. He's going to work on this shit, and then we're going to send him home. There's no
Yeah.
reason to trust that this guy is going to keep that
Yeah,
secret.
keep
There's
it
no,
secret.
there's just no
Yep.
reason to do that. So therefore, oh, okay. So then you bring in a guy, you have him contract, you have him see 0.1%, and then you release him, and you kind of cross your fingers, like,
See what
I hope he tells the people, please,
Mhm.
like, I hope he goes out and says what he saw, you
Mhm.
have to count on that. Give me a break.
Yeah.
And if you got all of the smartest, you got all the smartest people in a room in the 40s, and you spent a year game theory, game planning with some of the smartest people ever, combine that with some politicians and some high up military people who know what they're talking about, I think a lot of this could be foreseen.
Yeah. I agree. And I also think you want to, like with the Bob Lazar, you want to see what happens. You like, there are going to be people that want him spilling the beans and people that don't want him spilling the beans, and some that are like, hey, you know what? Let's see what happens, because we want to understand how we need to go about this moving forward, And you're going to have, because before you brought up Bob Lazar, when you were talking, I totally started thinking about Bob Lazar, and I was thinking about Bob Lazar and Stanton Friedman,
Mm-hmm.
and how Bob Lazar is the one that was like, hey, I was there, I saw X, Y, and Z. This was my experience. It was so scheduled that I was able to take other people out and show them when they were
Which is
test flights.
that is a huge, I mean, for the people that don't believe his story, that he was able to take people out, Lear and another guy. It wasn't Friedman. It was the other guy. It was,
No, yeah, I don't think it was Freeman, but
it
was
was
John
no,
Lear.
it was Knapp. It was Knapp.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, so, okay. So,
But
now,
anyway, just to finish the thought, they
go.
took them out to the hills of damn near Area 51 or whatever, and they saw some shit that didn't make sense and videoed it. Come on,
Yeah.
that's just unbelievable.
Yeah.
That's either he knew something, or he's literally the most lucky human of all time. You know what I'm saying? Like, hey, let me show you a UFO, and then you go outside and there's a UFO there. Like, give me a break.
I mean, that to me shows that clearly he knew some things. Now, whether or not, he could take people out to see stuff, and that stuff that they're seeing could just be top secret stuff that isn't.
Well, that's what he was saying it was. That's what he was saying it was.
Yeah.
He knew the time that they tested the different sport models and shit like that. He knew the schedules, and so he after he got fired and befriended Lear, or Lear befriended him, or whatever.
Yeah.
Then he took him out there and showed him. And that's why Lear, who to me seems like he just seems kind of like a straight shooter to me. I don't know. I'm just saying how it seems to me, John Lear. It's like Lear's on his side. You know what I'm saying? Like, Lear's like, yeah, I saw it. Like, I guess I'm on this guy's side now. I saw it with my own eyes. And that would convince me too, even if I didn't believe somebody, but then they can show me some crazy shit. It's like, oh, okay, I just didn't believe you at first, or it seemed weird, or it seemed improbable, because it does seem weird and improbable.
Yeah, definitely. And I can't help but think about how Stanton Friedman was pretty much against Lazar and saying Lazar was a fraud or something along those lines, saying he didn't have the documentation to back up some of his claims and all that, and was someone who was like, whatever, Lazar debunker, for lack of a better word. And but then Lazar had people like John Lear and George and Knapp on the side, but then you have someone like hello? Then you have someone like Bill Cooper, behold the pale horse, saying all of these guys were like intelligence people and you shouldn't trust any of them because they're all like part of some sort of disinformation thing. And I watched Knapp say that Bill Cooper was crazy, and he never should have met up with Bill Cooper, and how crazy Bill Cooper was.
Oh, it's Gene Huff. Gene Huff, John Lear, Bob Lazar. I'm watching the video right now.
Okay.
1989 S4 Papoose Lake flight footage.
Okay. But I'm just saying the levels of it, there are different layers of this, because you have like Bob Lazar saying this.
Well, right. We want as many layers as possible, right?
Right. And I'm just saying to try to purse through, which, I guess that would be an interesting case study to think about this through the lens of Lazar, Knapp, Friedman, Lear, and Bill Cooper. Like how they all represent a different layer of this.
And Mars. Remember that guy? I'm a big fan
Jim
of Mars.
Yeah. Jim Mars, right?
Oh, yeah. I read most of his books, man.
Yeah, no, I liked his stuff. You'd always pass his books on to me when you're done with them.
But again, it's like, how is he alive? Right. So then there's something. It's just like something is strange, right? Are all of these people feds? You know what I'm saying?
see, that's the whole thing, right? That's the whole thing. That at least has to be. You have to at least wonder.
Yeah, you better.
Yeah,
you better consider it.
You better consider it.
Not you. I know you are. I'm just saying. A person,
just in general.
A person better consider it.
Exactly. And like you ever see that movie or that show Boardwalk Empire?
Yes.
Okay. Do you remember Jeffrey Wright's character? He was like I don't know what you call him, like a black nationalist, or he would call himself a Libyan or something like that.
Yes, I remember that now.
Right. So he comes in and he kind of preaches this kind of highfalutin ideology where he's going to uplift the black people, and there are other black people in the show, and he's like doesn't like them. He's like, like the guy who's Omar from The Wire, he plays Chalky, and Chalky is the guy that he's like Nucky's guy, and whatever, part of the business, and Jeffrey Wright doesn't like him. And Jeffrey Wright's like, no, I keep it real, and we're here to free the black people and all this. But then at some point it comes out like he's just a crook too, but his scam is that part of his scam is that he preaches this highfalutin preach, but he's really just kind of like another criminal like the rest of them, if memory serves. And then J. Edgar Hoover busts him. And then J. Edgar Hoover is basically like, look, either you can rot in jail or you can work for me. And he's like, great, I'll work for you.
Right.
And so I think that's just basically the way things happen, more or less. Whereas like, or like whatever, The Departed, where Jack Nicholson's character, the mob boss or whatever, the crime boss, is really an informant for the feds, and it seems like Alex Jones has some element of that now, and maybe he always was that. That's what like Bill Cooper used to say about him, and and that's why like all these people like Alex Jones and Knapp, they're like, dude, Bill Cooper was crazy, and like that's what they stick to, and it does sound like he was pretty fucking crazy. But it seems like that guy was like not compromisable. Like that guy was like, no, fuck this. Like, like I'm just getting guns and I'm just gonna, tell the truth as I see it on, shortwave radio or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and write a book about it. And writing books, dude, there's some little fucking section of that book, Behold a Pale Horse, which he later came out and said a lot of the UFO stuff from it that he got from a lot of these, whatever, Stanton Friedmans and John Lears
Mm-hmm.
and all that, and Bob Lazar's. He said a lot of the stuff he got from them was total disinformation bullshit. And even though he published it in the book, he like later came out and said, don't trust that stuff. That stuff isn't legit. And I got fooled. That he had this little section in that book and this book came out in like 90 or 91 when there were like no school shootings. And he came out and he said, you're going to see in the coming years, you're going to see school shootings and you're going to see lots of them. Like, for example, it's it wasn't the only thing he said that was like, whoa.
Yeah.
Like, who would have seen that coming? And it's like, this guy predicted the shit, published it in a book, 10 years before, the Columbine, and before it made it cool, before it became cool to be a shooter, school shooter, he was going out and saying that shit.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I don't know, like the people like, that's why again, it's like, Jimmy Dore, he doesn't claim to be fucking Einstein. He's not like, I've got a 180 IQ. He's like, no, but I'm a comedian. I have common sense. And I'm not lying. I'm just going to come out and say the truth as I see it. Maybe I get some shit wrong, but I'll come out and say it, And I remember, like, for example, when like the Seth Rich shit was kind of out there. Do you remember that Seth Rich thing?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I mean, that was something that I was like, if you brought up Seth Rich, that was anything other than a random robbery, then you're Hitler. You're a Trumper. And it was like, whoa, what the fuck? Like, this dude got killed. He might have been the leak to WikiLeaks. And it's like the FBI still has that dude's laptop. It won't. Jimmy Dore covered that shit. Amongst others. But Jimmy Dore was one of the few from the left that covered the Seth Rich or tried to.
Yeah.
And then he got attacked. That's when they started coming up with terms like the dirtbag left for people like Jimmy Dore or myself. The dirtbag left. Like, you can't listen to these dirtbags. Okay, maybe it's hard to call them a right winger, but they're a dirtbag.
Yeah.
That'll do that person in to call him a dirtbag, and it was just like covering that shit. And he wasn't like claiming to know what really happened, but he was just trying to cover it and be like, okay, lay out the facts as they were. And then he got like, so attacked for that. And then I remember Seymour Hersh came out with something about Seth Rich. And then it was like this big blow up bombshell for a little bit. But then it was like and Seymour Hersh, it wasn't as easy to discredit Seymour Hersh as it was Jimmy Dore. Even though now, Seymour Hersh, his name is mud in liberal circles, which just goes to show how there is no more left. There is no more liberal left anymore. It's just this like, wolf in sheep's clothing.
Yeah.
Which the wolf in sheep's clothing just happened to be the sign, the sigil of the Fabian socialists, which is interesting because it brings back when you were talking about E.T. and Close Encounters and, and all these books at Barnes and Nobles. It's like the part of the strategy of the Fabian socialists which I think they started in like 1884 or something like that. Though I feel like Jack Cruz says that they started more in like the 1840s, when one of the queens took over, maybe Victoria or whoever, and that she and whatever and the Fabian socialism thing seems to be and their thing was gradualism, like incrementalism. Like,
Mhm.
don't just go and overthrow the whole thing and just, light it all on fire and flip the board over and destroy the game. It's like, no, no, no. You do it slowly, incrementally, and gradually, so
Yeah.
that you boil the frog slowly.
Yeah.
And that clearly seems to be, although now you see the pace picking up because I don't know. I mean, whether it's like that thing you sent me from Reddit, it's like it seems like, or at least the narrative that we're supposed to believe, and I'm open to, is that, yeah, they're in panic mode because Russia and China are finding shit too now.
Mhm.
And we're not the only player in this game.
Right. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Um, and that's why, and honestly, to bring it back to the Tom Longo thing, is like to try to talk about and understand the deep state and the elements of it that come from things like this, whether it's the City of London or the Knights Templar or whatever, and all these different secret societies, or what the Zhang says about the Jews and the black nobility or and the Frankists,
Mhm.
and it's like trying to understand versus like, it's been tricky because like people like I maybe I was gonna say people like you and me, but I'll just say people like myself. It's like it seemed like the George Carlin thing is one big club and you ain't in it. Um, but there's some nuance to that club, and listening to people like Tom Longo, I feel like it's helpful, even though it might be difficult and challenging for me at times. I think it's helpful to listen to things you don't agree with necessarily, and that that are very different than what you're normally listening to, because it's healthy to challenge your own assumptions and your own confirmation bias, you know. And it bothers me that Longo defends Israel so much. Not that it doesn't bother me that he defends against the claims of the quote unquote the Jews,
Mhm.
because I've got a problem with that too. Even if there's some truth to that, like I do think there maybe is some truth to that that's beyond just the Zionists and the Rothschilds. Like there could be something that I just view it like, look, we were never allowed to hold normal jobs, and build a normal life for hundreds of years. We were put in ghettos and kicked out of countries, you know. So it makes sense that if you're kicked out of all these countries, and then you got to find other places to live, and then you got to find, trade routes, and you got to map out, how to travel from one landmass to another, and you hear about like the Spanish Inquisition, and I don't know if you ever like, I met some old dude a few years back who's like, you ever hear about the Jewish pirates of the Caribbean? And I was like, no, tell me. And he told me about it. I started looking it up a bit, and looks like basically in the Spanish Inquisition, they exiled and kicked out a lot of these Jews, and a lot of Jews escaped, and they became like these pirates of the Caribbean. So they would go and do what pirates do. And not many people think about pirates, but that's what like Trump just did. Trump just did that to fucking Venezuela. It's just piracy.
Mhm.
What do you think corporations are? Official piracy. The British East India Company. I'm just saying, like, I think there are sympathetic narratives to my people. In that, like, if we were exiled and not allowed to hold office or whatever, hold a normal job, and one of the few things we could do is like banking or be a merchant, then it's not just because we're evil, it's because like, no, we weren't allowed to fucking do anything else. And so we did the only things that we had the opportunity to do. And then, there are going to be advanced systems that develop within that, they learn trade routes, they learn how to stop over here, and and then the Rothschilds create international banking, or after the Templars, and they're like, yeah, because you ship all that gold somewhere to trade. What happens if your ship, sinks or gets robbed by pirates.
Mhm.
You lose all that
Mhm.
gold. Don't you want to just write this letter of credit and now you remove the risk? That's insurance, and then you see how like, oh yeah, that's, like Bucky Fuller talks about, you want to build these ships and go and do international trade. And that's how basically almost all major fortunes were amassed through international trade, and you have these groups like the Phoenicians and, and and as a Jewish person, I have no animosity towards Jews that makes me like interested in this, other than I've always been told this story about us. And now that I find there's some nuance and some fine print that was never told to me, and then you have some people that like whatever that are truly anti-Semitic, that are just hate Jews and think Jews are just evil, and they do X, Y, and Z just because they're evil, as opposed to like, no, they didn't really have much other option, and they were smart and capable, and then they eventually, developed things like trade organizations, and not that they always did it, but other groups did that too, like merchants. Like, you ever heard like the Hanseatic League?
No.
No, it's really hard to find information. Try to look up the Hanseatic League. It's like some, group of international traders from whatever, like 600 or 700 years ago, that like amassed great wealth and power and set up like their own like international organizations where they were, set up ports and, and how are you going to compete with that if you're going to be like, oh, I'm going to, you know what I'm saying? Like, think about this. This is a type of historical and social evolution, that at some point in the future, if good history will allow it to be written about it, like we'll have a better understanding of this stuff. And instead of just like this, kind of like the way a lot of Christians, they look at the aliens and a lot of them are saying like, these are demons. And look, I'm open to shit like
or
that.
Angels, demons
angels.
and angels, right? It's like, that it's a divine realm phenomenon.
Yeah. And to me, I'm like, I don't know, that sounds like, I don't know why you need to take it there, but okay, I'm open to it. But I can see how someone born and raised to see things through the lens of the Bible might interpret these things as angels and demons,
or the people in the Bible were describing this shit in the best words they could back when they were experiencing it.
Exactly.
Like, I saw this crazy thing. That was a demon. Like, all right.
Right. Or like, the shit like Columbus sailing and then seeing like the candle, he would describe it as like lit candles coming out of the water.
Oh yeah, I know. Oh, it's an awesome early UFO sighting. Yeah, it's excellent.
Yeah,
it's pretty well
right?
described too. I've read it. I don't know if you have. Sounds like you have, but yeah, absolutely. It's nuts.
And it's just fascinating, and then you have like, in modern times, you have like the right wing that have become much more open to conspiracies or looking into conspiracies, and the left that is like, if you think something is a conspiracy, then you're a right winger. It's like, what? But now it's like, if you bring up aliens to the right wingers, they think that's a conspiracy, that aliens are all bullshit, and that's all cover for government, secret stuff, which of course some of it clearly is, but they think all of it is, and it's all just an excuse to get more money, which I'm sure some of it is, but they're just so certain that it's all bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
Or if there's anything to it, it's angels and demons, and then you go to people who are more liberal, and they're like, if you talk about whatever, 9/11 or COVID, and you question that shit, they're like, you're crazy, and you're like, you got three heads, but they can talk about aliens,
Right.
And they can consider aliens as maybe being real, and the aliens was the thing that was by far the most far-fetched of all of these ideas, just inherently, because it's not that hard for me to wrap my mind around, like, maybe governments or intelligence agencies are lying about how an event happened. Like, yes, that happens. That's human, it's part of human nature is to lie and cover up, but something otherworldly, like that's just a little bit hard. The level of proof and evidence to prove that is just harder to prove,
Yeah.
you know? I don't know. All of these nuances to me are part of the interesting thing that helps you separate the noise from the signal,
Yeah.
You gotta go.
Yeah, let's call it. I gotta feed the cats, and we've been
Okay.
rocking for a while. And it
Yeah,
was
dude.
awesome, and I'll talk to you next time. Whoa, that was
Awesome,
crazy.
man. Great talking to you, Dogon.
You too. Boom. Stop share. And stop recording.